She arrived earlier than planned, even though she had told herself not to. Being early gave her too much time to think, but being late always felt worse. She rolled through the cafe doors slowly, careful not to draw attention, even though she knew that was impossible. The place was warm and smelled like coffee and baked bread. Soft music played in the background, the kind that tried to make everyone feel calm. She chose a small table near the window, not too close to the door, not too hidden either. Somewhere neutral, somewhere safe. She positioned her wheelchair neatly, making sure it wasn't blocking the aisle. She hated when people had to squeeze past her. It always came with looks, some curious, some awkward, some full of pity. She adjusted her jacket and smoothed her hands over her lap, a habit she didn't even realize she had anymore. Her phone buzzed with a message from a friend who had set this whole thing up. He should be there soon. You like him? She read it, but didn't apply. Blind dates were never easy, but this one felt heavier. Not because she didn't want to be there. She did. She wanted to believe that meeting someone new could still be simple, that it didn't always have to come with explanations. But experience had taught her otherwise. At some point, it always came up, sometimes before the date, sometimes during, sometimes in the middle of an awkward silence that stretched too long. She had debated telling him beforehand. She really had. Her fingers hovered over her phone more than once in the days leading up to this. A simple message. Just one line. By the way, I use a wheelchair. Honest. Clear. No surprises. But every time she typed it out, she erased it. Not because she was ashamed, but because she was tired. Tired of feeling like she had to explain herself before she was even seen as a person. So she didn't say anything. Now, sitting there with a warm cup of tea she hadn't touched, she wondered if that had been a mistake. Her eyes moved to the door every time it opened. A couple walked in laughing. Then a man on his phone. Then someone rushing out, late for something. Her heart beat faster with each glance. She tried to slow her breathing, reminding herself that she had done nothing wrong. She was here. She showed up. That counted for something. Her thoughts drifted to past dates. There were a few that still stung when she remembered them. The man who froze when he saw her, then spent the entire time talking to Floor. The one who stayed for 10 minutes, checked his watch, and said he'd forgotten an important call. The one who tried too hard, asking personal questions that felt more like an interview than a conversation. And then there were the worst ones, the ones who smiled politely but clearly stopped listening the moment they noticed a chair. She pushed those memories away. Tonight was different, she told herself. New place, new person, new chance. The door opened again. This time, she knew. He stepped inside, looking around the cafe like someone searching for a familiar face in a crowd. He wasn't what she would call striking, but there was something calm about him. He wore a simple jacket and held his phone loosely in his hand. Glancing down at it, then back up, his eyes moved from table to table until they landed on her. For a second, his face showed recognition, then confusion, then understanding. That was the moment she dreaded. She felt it before he even reached her table. The shift, the quick mental adjustment people made when reality didn't match the picture in their head. She straightened her back, preparing herself. When he walked closer, she offered a small smile, the kind she had practiced over years. Polite, gentle, ready. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for her to notice. Long enough for old fears to rise up again. Before he could speak, she decided to take control of the moment. She had learned that waiting only made things worse. Her voice was steady, even though her chest felt tight. "Sorry," she said softly. "I'm in a wheelchair. I should have told you." The words came out the same way they always did. Calm on the surface, heavy underneath. She watched his face carefully, the way she always did. People thought they hid their reactions well, but they rarely did. A raised eyebrow, a tight smile, a quick glance away. She braced herself for all of it. Inside, her thoughts raced. Maybe he would say it was fine, but look uncomfortable. Maybe he would sit down out of politeness and leave early. Maybe he would make a joke that didn't land. Or maybe, worst of all, he would apologize and say this was what he expected. She hated that she had learned to expect disappointment. She hated that this moment, just seconds long, held so much power over her emotions. But it did. The cafe noise seemed to grow louder. Cups clinking. Someone laughing too loudly at another table. A chair scraping the floor. She focused on her hands again, resting quietly in her lap. She reminded herself that whatever happened next did not define her worth. She had repeated that line to herself many times over the years. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. She took another breath and looked up at him, meeting his eyes. There was no challenge in her gaze, no apology beyond the words she had already said. Just honesty. This was her truth, and now it was his move. For a brief second, everything felt suspended, like the world had paused to watch how he would respond. She had been in this moment before, more times than she cared to count. Yet every time it felt new, raw, unpredictable. She thought about standing up, how easy it was for others, how complicated it had become for her life in ways she never planned. The accident that changed everything. The long recovery. The doctor's voices, calm and careful. The slow realization that life would move forward just differently. She had rebuilt herself piece by piece since then. Learned patience. Learned strength. Learned how to advocate for herself in rooms that weren't built with her in mind. And still, moments like this could shake her. She waited, not because she had no words left, but because she had already said the only one that mattered. Now, it was up to him to show her who he was. He froze for a moment. It was a kind of pause that could feel uncomfortable, but she realized quickly that it was not discomfort he felt, at least not the kind she had expected. He looked down at her, then around the small space of the cafe, and back at her again. There was a careful thoughtfulness in his expression, a way of measuring the situation that felt different from the rushed judgments she had grown used to. She waited, her hands still resting on her lap, her posture straight. She could feel her heart beating faster than she wanted it to. Part of her wanted to retreat into herself, to give up before disappointment arrived. But another part, the part that had survived long nights alone and challenges she had never expected to face, told her to stay. She had come this far. She was not going to let this moment define the rest of the evening. Finally, he spoke. "Thank you for telling me," he said, his voice calm. "I appreciate your honesty." She blinked, surprised. Most people did not respond with gratitude. Most people responded with a quiet shift in their expression, a hesitation, or even a polite, awkward smile. But his words carried weight. They were genuine. They carried acceptance. He moved carefully toward the table, scanning the space as if he wanted to make sure everything was right. She could tell he was thinking about the logistics of sitting across from her, making the space comfortable for both of them. There was no rush, no sign of impatience. "Is this okay?" he asked, gesturing toward the seat across from her. She nodded. "Yes, thank you." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes, and sat down. The movement was careful but natural, as if he understood that small gestures could make a big difference. She felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. She had been ready for the awkwardness, the discomfort, the sudden change in plans. But instead, she felt seen in a way she hadn't expected to feel in a long time. The cafe continued its usual rhythm around them, cups clinking, people chatting, the faint music floating above it all. For a moment, it was just the two of them. She realized she was curious now, more than anxious. She wanted to hear his voice, his thoughts, and the stories he might share. She wanted to see if this connection could go beyond politeness and expectation. "Would you like some coffee or tea?" he asked. "My treat." She smiled softly. "Tea, please." The server came over quickly, and he placed their orders. While waiting, there was a natural silence, one that didn't feel heavy or uncomfortable. It was easy, like a soft pause that allowed both of them to settle in. She found herself observing him, noticing the small details, the way he smiled when he talked, the way his eyes seemed genuinely attentive, the subtle tilt of his head when he listened. It was refreshing. She realized she had been craving attention like this, not the kind that forced pity or sympathy, but the kind that simply noticed her presence as it was. They started talking, carefully at first, about the small things, the weather, the cafe, the neighborhood. But as the minutes passed, Their conversation deepened naturally. He asked about her interests, her favorite books, what made her laugh. She answered honestly, sharing bits of herself she had kept guarded for too long. He listened without interruption, without judgment, without the need to fix or explain. He asked follow-up questions that showed he was engaged, curious, and genuinely interested. She found herself laughing at something he said, a small, clever observation about the world, and felt a lightness she hadn't expected. Laughter was rare these days, and yet it came easily here. She realized that she had been waiting for someone to treat her like a person first, not a wheelchair, not a label. And here he was doing exactly that. As the tea arrived, the server placed the cups gently on the table. He nodded politely and thanked her for letting him order. There was a subtle attentiveness in his actions, a quiet respect that was difficult to describe but impossible to ignore. It made her feel safe, like the small world they had created at this table was one where she could just be herself. They talked about work and hobbies, the kind of conversation that didn't need to impress but simply connect. He shared stories from his life that were both funny and honest, and she felt a genuine interest in his experiences. She, in turn, shared moments that mattered to her, not just the polished, socially acceptable parts. He nodded, laughed, and responded in ways that felt real and grounded. She noticed that he didn't ask about her disability, not immediately. He didn't need to. The conversation flowed without awkward questions or forced concern. It was liberating. She felt the usual walls she carried around with her start to soften. She realized she had been holding back for too long, shielding herself from potential rejection. But here with him, it felt okay to let some of that guard down. At one point, he made a small mistake, knocking his cup slightly, and she laughed. The laughter wasn't about the clumsiness. It was about the shared humanity in the moment. He laughed too, and it created a ripple that seemed to ease any remaining tension. Small moments like this, she realized, were the foundation of real connection. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but simple, shared human experiences. Time passed without her noticing. The initial nervousness she felt melted away into something warmer, more relaxed. She found herself genuinely enjoying his company, the way he listened, the way he responded, and the ease with which the conversation flowed. It was rare to find someone who could meet her where she was, not trying to change her or define her by a single aspect of her life. He asked her about her dreams, her goals, the things that kept her going even on hard days. She answered thoughtfully, feeling a strange sense of relief that he cared about her thoughts and ambitions rather than just the surface of her life. His questions were simple but meaningful, inviting her to share without pressure, without expectation. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. There was no pity, no awkwardness, no rushed exit strategy. Just two people sharing a space, a conversation, and a moment that felt quietly extraordinary. She noticed the way he made small adjustments to be comfortable, the way he leaned slightly to hear her better, the way he maintained eye contact without staring. Every little gesture communicated respect, consideration, and interest. It was subtle, but it made a difference she could feel in her chest. As the conversation continued, she began to imagine what it would be like if people approached her like this more often, if they saw her as a full person first, not someone defined by her wheelchair. The thought was comforting, almost revolutionary in its simplicity. It wasn't that she expected everyone to behave this way, but tonight, this one person had, and it mattered. They shared stories of childhood memories, favorite places, and small adventures that had shaped them. Each story revealed more layers, more humanity, more connection. She found herself asking questions, curious about his experiences, his perspectives, and his dreams. He answered with honesty, vulnerability, and a lightness that made it easy to respond in kind. At one point, she noticed people glancing their way, not in a judgmental sense, but as if their quiet interaction had created a small bubble of interest around them. She didn't mind. In fact, it made her smile, noticing that something as simple as a genuine conversation could draw attention without effort or pretense. She realized that the nervousness that had clung to her earlier had completely vanished. It had been replaced by a sense of ease, a rare feeling that made her want to linger in the moment, to savor the connection that had begun to form. She felt seen, heard, and respected in ways that were rare and precious. As the first part of the date continued, she reflected on how small actions could carry so much weight. A simple acknowledgement, a careful adjustment, a kind word, all of these things combined to create a space where she felt valued. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatics. It was about attention, respect, and genuine human connection. She realized that tonight could be the start of something different, something she hadn't expected. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. Not reckless hope, but cautious hope, the kind that grows from small moments of honesty, understanding, and mutual respect. She had been ready to expect disappointment, but instead, she found herself feeling curious, engaged, and most importantly, comfortable. The tea had cooled slightly, but neither of them seemed to notice. The conversation continued effortlessly, flowing from one topic to another. She felt a sense of relief, a sense of gratitude, and an unexpected joy. It was rare to find someone who could treat her as a person first, not defined by circumstance, and yet here he was doing just that. She knew the night was still young, but she already felt that something important had begun. Something quiet, something human, something real. And as she watched him speak, laugh, and listen, she realized that this moment, this simple, unassuming moment, had already changed something inside her. It had reminded her that connection was possible, that understanding was possible, and that kindness, when genuine, could be transformative. The pause she had feared at the beginning of the date had come and passed. It had not been awkward or uncomfortable. Instead, it had been a threshold into something unexpected and rare, a real meeting of two people, not defined by expectation or fear, but by honesty, respect, and a shared willingness to be present. She smiled to herself, quietly thankful that she had shown up, that she had spoken her truth, and that he had responded not with hesitation or pity, but with thoughtfulness and grace. And in that small cafe, amidst the hum of daily life, two strangers continued to talk, laugh, and connect, unaware that this simple beginning could change the way they both saw the world, themselves, and each other. The cafe had grown quiet, the soft hum of conversations replaced by the faint sounds of footsteps and the clinking of distant dishes. Outside, the city was alive but gentle, the streetlights casting a warm glow over the sidewalks. She noticed how comfortable she felt now, how easy it was to sit there and talk without worrying about what he might think of her wheelchair, her limitations, or the way she moved through the world. The initial tension, the anxiety that had gnawed at her heart before the date, had melted into something lighter, almost unrecognizable. He leaned slightly forward, elbows resting on the table, and asked her what she liked to do when she had free time. She shared her quiet passions, reading in corners of the city where no one else seemed to notice, creating small art projects that only she and a few close friends would see, and long walks to places where the world felt different, even if only for a few minutes. She spoke without hesitation because he listened. He listened in a way that demanded nothing, interrupted nothing, and yet made her feel seen. He smiled and asked thoughtful questions, not out of politeness, but out of genuine curiosity. She shared stories of moments that had shaped her, both small and significant, and he responded with warmth and interest. He didn't pity her or offer solutions where none were needed. Instead, he connected with her experiences, reflecting on his own in a way that made her feel understood. The conversation shifted to humor. He told a story about an awkward mistake he had made at work, and she laughed freely, the sound light and easy. The laughter didn't just come from the story. It came from the comfort she felt in his presence. She realized she hadn't laughed like this on a first date in years. His laughter joined hers, matching her rhythm, creating a shared space that felt rare and unforced. At one point, he suggested they take a short walk outside. The idea caught her off guard, but she agreed. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the unspoken message that he wanted to extend their time together beyond the confines of the cafe. They maneuvered carefully through the door and onto the quiet sidewalk. The night air was cool and smelled faintly of rain from earlier, carrying a freshness that made her feel awake and alive. They walked slowly, side by side, sharing observations about their surroundings, the way the city lights reflected in puddles, the faint smell of fresh pastries from a nearby bakery, and the occasional laughter of people passing by. He matched his pace to hers without comment, an unspoken awareness that made her feel cared for in a subtle but profound way. During the walk, She spoke about her dreams, the ambition she had held close to her chest for years. He listened without interruption, asking thoughtful questions that encouraged her to explore her ideas more deeply. She shared her creative hopes, her professional aspirations, and even the small, whimsical dreams she had carried since childhood. He responded with genuine interest, not judgment, making her feel valued for the person she truly was. As they approached a small park, empty except for the occasional rustle of leaves, he suggested they sit on a bench for a few minutes. She agreed, and as they settled in, the conversation took a softer turn. They spoke of childhood memories, sun-drenched afternoons, awkward first attempts at sports, favorite teachers, and small incidents that had made lasting impressions. Each story they shared revealed more about who they were, the experiences that shaped them, and the ways they had learned to navigate the world. At one point, she noticed a small puddle that could have obstructed her wheelchair, and before she could adjust, he had already moved slightly to guide her safely around it. The gesture was simple, but spoke volumes. It wasn't performative or exaggerated. It was an instinctive act of thoughtfulness that made her feel seen and cared for. In that moment, she realized that genuine consideration often comes in these small, quiet actions rather than grand gestures. They spoke of challenges, both big and small. She shared moments when she had felt isolated, frustrated, or underestimated because of her disability. He listened intently, his responses empathetic and validating, never pitying, never overcompensating. When he spoke of his own fears or moments of self-doubt, she felt a resonance between them, a quiet acknowledgement that life's obstacles, though different for everyone, were shared in their human impact. Laughter returned easily, lighter than before, sparked by small misunderstandings, shared observations, and occasional joke. Each laugh dissolved a bit more tension that had lingered in her body for years. She realized how much she had missed this. Simple, genuine joy without performance, without fear of judgment. The ease of their interaction was unexpected and delightful. As they continued walking, the conversation drifted naturally to ambitions and aspirations. She spoke of wanting to create things that mattered, to contribute meaningfully in ways that reflected her values. He responded with interest and curiosity, asking questions that encouraged her to think more deeply about her goals. It was supported without being pushy, encouraging without overwhelming, a balance she rarely found. They paused at a small bridge overlooking a quiet canal. The water shimmered under the city lights, calm and reflective. They stood together, taking the view, and she felt a rare sense of peace wash over her. He asked her what brought her calm and clarity, and she shared her quiet practices, the small rituals that allowed her to reset and feel centered. His responses were thoughtful, as if he were taking the time to truly understand her world. The night continued, each conversation flowing effortlessly into the next. She found herself revealing things she usually kept private, trusting that he would receive them without judgment. And he did. There was a balance between sharing and listening, between humor and depth, between curiosity and patience. Each moment added layers to a connection that already felt meaningful. They laughed again, this time at something trivial, a small misunderstanding earlier in the cafe that had seemed inconsequential, but now felt like a thread tying them closer together. The laughter wasn't forced. It was real, a shared acknowledgement of imperfection and humanity. She realized that it was in these moments, small and quiet, that the deepest bonds often formed. He asked about her favorite spots in the city, and she described places where she felt alive, at peace, or inspired. He listened, asking questions and reflecting on her choices with genuine interest. She felt appreciated, not for appearances or convenience, but for the way she saw and experienced the world. Each question, each observation, each story shared strength in the trust between them. As the walk continued, she felt a growing sense of connection and anticipation, not in a nervous or anxious way, but in a calm, hopeful manner. The evening had transformed from a simple blind date into something much more significant, a quiet, human connection that felt rare and precious. She reflected on how much the small gestures mattered, listening, guiding, asking, sharing, laughing, all the little threads woven together to create this moment of closeness. The streets were calm, and the air held a quiet promise of possibilities. She realized that her initial fear of being judged or misunderstood had been replaced by a comforting sense of being valued for herself. Every interaction, every word, every small act of attentiveness had contributed to this feeling. It wasn't about grand declarations or dramatic romance. It was about authenticity, presence, and care. They eventually made their way back toward the starting point of the evening. The cafe, now empty, felt like a witness to the start of something meaningful. He held the door open for her as they re-entered to gather their belongings, a simple act of consideration that continued to reinforce the trust and comfort between them. She felt gratitude, not just for the gesture, but for the consistent thoughtfulness he had shown all evening. He asked if she wanted to continue walking or head somewhere else, and they decided to take a few more steps along the quiet streets, talking about little observations, sharing memories, and laughing at small jokes. She noticed how effortless the interaction had become, how natural it felt to share space, conversation, and presence. The connection had grown steadily, grounded in respect, attentiveness, and mutual curiosity. As they walked, she reflected on how rare it was to meet someone who treated her as a person first, not defined by a wheelchair or limitations. She felt seen, understood, and appreciated for her thoughts, her humor, and her personality. This realization filled her with a quiet warmth, a sense of hope she hadn't expected to feel at the start of the evening. The night continued, and with each step, the bond between them strengthened. There was no rush, no need to force conversation or impress one another. Instead, there was ease, trust, and the simple joy of sharing moments with someone who genuinely cared. She realized that this evening, which had begun with apprehension, had transformed into an experience of connection, empathy, and laughter, rare and beautiful in its simplicity. As they approached the final stretch of their walk, she felt an unusual confidence, not arrogance, not expectation, but the calm certainty that this encounter had created something meaningful, something real, something that could grow with care and attention. She felt gratitude, hope, and a quiet excitement for what might come next. The evening, which had started with hesitation and uncertainty, had evolved into a rare moment of human connection. She had felt seen, understood, and valued in ways that went far beyond appearances or superficial gestures. The laughter, the shared stories, the quiet attentiveness, all of it combined to create a memory she knew she would carry with her. And as the city lights reflected softly on the pavement, she realized that tonight had shown her something she had longed for but rarely found. Genuine, thoughtful human connection, built in small moments, gentle gestures, and honest conversation. It was a kind of evening that stayed with you, quietly shaping your hope and trust in the goodness of people. The days after their second meeting brought a sense of quiet anticipation she hadn't felt in years. She found herself replaying the evening in her mind, recalling his laughter, the thoughtful way he listened, and the ease of their conversation. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a feeling of genuine connection that left her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. Each time she thought about him, she felt warmth rather than anxiety, curiosity rather than fear. He reached out to her with a simple message. "I really enjoyed today. Would you like to meet again soon?" The message made her smile. It was straightforward, thoughtful, and kind, reflecting the same sincerity she felt throughout their time together. She replied promptly, her words warm and honest, agreeing to meet him again. There was an excitement in her chest, quiet but persistent, a feeling that something meaningful was beginning to grow. Their third meeting was planned at a small botanical garden she had mentioned liking. As she arrived, she felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation, though the nerves were softer this time. He greeted her with a warm smile, his eyes showing genuine pleasure at seeing her again. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was simple, sincere, and exactly what she needed. They began to walk slowly along the winding paths, the smell of flowers and the sound of birds creating a peaceful backdrop. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting gentle shadows on the paths. He had remembered the little details she had mentioned before, the spots she liked, the benches she preferred, and they moved at a pace that felt comfortable for her. The attentiveness he showed was quiet and natural, never overbearing, always considerate. As they walked, they shared stories about their daily lives, the small victories and struggles of the week. She spoke about finishing a project she had been working on, small but meaningful to her. He listened carefully, asking questions and celebrating her achievement without exaggeration. It felt good to be acknowledged for her efforts, not with pity, but with genuine interest and appreciation. In turn, he shared moments from his week, both successes and challenges. She laughed at a story about a humorous misunderstanding at work, and he laughed at her funny observation about a local bakery. The conversation flowed naturally, with laughter, reflection, and the comfort of shared attention. She realized that the ease between them was growing stronger, built on mutual understanding and respect. They paused by a small fountain, where the water shimmered in the sunlight. He asked her what she enjoyed most about the garden. She spoke about the colors, the quiet corners where one could sit and think, and the way certain flowers reminded her of moments from her childhood. He listened intently, asking gentle questions that encouraged her to reflect further. She felt a rare sense of being truly seen and understood. Their conversation gradually shifted to dreams and aspirations. She shared the creative projects she had hoped to pursue, the causes she cared about, and the personal goals she had long kept private. He responded with interest and encouragement, asking thoughtful questions that prompted her to think more deeply about her plans. His support was steady and reassuring, never overbearing, and it allowed her to feel confident in expressing herself fully. As they walked along a shaded path, they came across a small incline that could have posed a challenge for her wheelchair. Without hesitation, he slowed and subtly guided her around it, ensuring she felt safe and comfortable. She appreciated the gesture deeply, not because it was extraordinary, but because it reflected consistent thoughtfulness and awareness. He wasn't trying to show off or perform a heroic act. He was simply being considerate, in tune with her needs without making a fuss. They stopped at a bench overlooking a pond. The water reflected the surrounding greenery, creating a serene scene. For a few moments, they sat in companionable silence, simply enjoying the calm. She felt a quiet sense of peace, grateful for the simplicity of the moment and the shared presence. He asked her what brought her calm in life, and she spoke about quiet rituals, reading, and finding small pockets of solitude in the city. His attentive listening made her feel that her perspective truly mattered. After a while, their conversation shifted to childhood memories. She told him about her favorite games, her imaginary adventures, and small incidents that had shaped her sense of self. He shared his own stories in response, and they laughed together, appreciating the innocence and humor of their younger selves. These stories revealed layers of their personalities, allowing them to see one another more deeply and understand experiences that had influenced them. As the afternoon moved on, he suggested grabbing a snack at a nearby cafe. She agreed, and they found a small, cozy spot. The simplicity of the meal contrasted with the depth of their conversation. Over tea and pastries, they discussed life lessons, small mistakes, and moments of joy. The conversation remained effortless, flowing naturally without any need for forced topics. She felt a growing trust in him, a confidence that she could share openly without fear of judgment. He asked her what qualities she valued most in people. She spoke about kindness, honesty, attentiveness, and humor. He nodded, reflecting on his own values and expressing that he appreciated similar traits. She felt a quiet alignment with him, a sense that they shared not only interests but fundamental principles that shaped how they approached life and relationships. As they left the cafe, they returned to the garden. The late afternoon light cast a warm glow, and the air carried the faint scent of flowers. He suggested taking a detour to a small bridge she had mentioned liking on a previous visit. She agreed, enjoying the quiet stroll. When they reached the bridge, she paused to admire the reflection of the trees and sky and the water. He asked her what she thought about in moments like this, and she shared her reflections on presence, gratitude, and appreciating small details. He listened thoughtfully, nodding in understanding, and she felt a deep sense of connection in their shared contemplative moment. The garden began to empty as the evening approached. The quiet atmosphere made their conversation even more intimate. He asked her what brought her happiness, and she spoke about meaningful connections, creative pursuits, and moments of genuine joy with people who cared. He shared his own sources of happiness, and she realized how aligned their perspectives were. It wasn't forced compatibility, but a natural resonance built on shared values and experiences. As dusk fell, they made their way toward the exit. The streets outside the garden were calm, illuminated softly by street lamps. She felt a growing sense of contentment, not just from the date itself, but from a knowledge that someone could appreciate her fully for who she was. The worry and self-consciousness she carried about being in a wheelchair seemed distant now, replaced by a feeling of acceptance and understanding. Before parting ways, he smiled and said, "I really enjoy spending time with you. I hope we can do this again soon." She returned his smile warmly, feeling her chest fill with quiet joy. "I'd like that," she replied honestly. There was no pressure, no grand gestures, just a mutual understanding that a meaningful connection was unfolding. As she headed home, she reflected on the day. It had been filled with laughter, thoughtful conversation, small gestures of care, and moments of quiet reflection. She realized that genuine human connection didn't need to be dramatic or showy. It was built in subtle ways, attentive listening, shared stories, kindness, humor, and a quiet willingness to be fully present with someone else. She felt hopeful in a way she hadn't felt in years. This experience had shown her that someone could see her, understand her, and appreciate her for who she truly was. It wasn't about pity or obligation. It was about respect, empathy, and shared humanity. That realization filled her with a sense of possibility, a gentle excitement for what might come next in her life, and in this new connection. Even as she settled in at home, she couldn't stop thinking about the small moments that had made the day so meaningful. The way he had guided her around obstacles, the laughter they had shared, the thoughtful questions that had encouraged her to open up, and the quiet moments of reflection they had experienced together. These moments, she realized, were what truly built a bond, far more than any grand gesture ever could. By the time she went to sleep that night, her heart felt light, her mind calm, and her spirit quietly hopeful. The connection she had begun to nurture with him was growing steadily, grounded in attentiveness, respect, and genuine interest. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen, understood, and appreciated, not despite her disability, but simply as herself. And that realization carried a profound sense of joy, hope, and anticipation for the future. The days following their third meeting were filled with quiet excitement she could hardly ignore. Every message from him, no matter how small, carried warmth and thoughtfulness. She began noticing how much she looked forward to sharing her day with someone who truly listened, someone who responded not out of politeness, but because he genuinely cared. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, calm, steady, and quietly exhilarating all at once. When he suggested they spend the next day trying something new, she felt a mix of curiosity and anticipation. They decided to visit a small art exhibit in the city. She loved art, though she rarely found people who shared her enthusiasm in a way that felt real. The thought of sharing her passion with him made her both nervous and excited, but she trusted the ease they had built together. The exhibit was intimate, with soft lighting and thoughtfully arranged pieces. As they moved through the rooms, she shared her favorite works, explaining why certain colors, textures, or compositions spoke to her. He listened carefully, genuinely interested, asking questions that encouraged her to express herself more deeply. He didn't rush her, didn't interrupt. He simply gave her the space to speak, validating her thoughts without judgment. She noticed how attentive he was to her comfort, subtly adjusting his pace to match hers, and making sure she could access every part of the exhibit. It wasn't performative. It was instinctive and considerate. She realized again that his care wasn't about heroics. It was about thoughtfulness, respect, and empathy. These small actions mattered far more than grand gestures ever could. As they explored the exhibit, she found herself opening up more than ever before. She shared not just her thoughts about the art, but also memories, reflections, and dreams connected to creativity and expression. He responded with a mix of curiosity, encouragement, and humor, making her feel fully understood and appreciated. She laughed at his lighthearted observations, and he laughed at hers, the sound mingling naturally, echoing lightly through the gallery. They moved to a quiet corner where a small sculpture had captured her attention. She described how it reminded her of something she had always wanted to create, a project she had dreamed about but never pursued. He asked her more about it, genuinely interested in her vision and ideas. The conversation went deeper, exploring not just artistic aspirations, but her hopes and fears about pursuing them. She felt a rare sense of trust, a certainty that she could speak openly without being judged. After the exhibit, they decided to grab a bite to eat at a nearby cafe. The conversation continued effortlessly, covering topics ranging from childhood memories to recent experiences. She shared stories of challenges she had faced, both in daily life and in her personal journey. And he listened intently, responding with empathy and thoughtful reflections. She realized how rare it was to find someone who could balance attentiveness with humor, seriousness with lightness, and curiosity with respect. During the meal, they spoke about vulnerability and trust. She told him how hard it could be to open up to people, how often she had been misunderstood or underestimated. He listened quietly, nodding in understanding, without offering empty reassurances or pity. Instead, he shared moments from his own life when he felt uncertain or judged, creating a space of mutual honesty. She felt the bond between them deepen, strengthened by authenticity and shared understanding. They left the cafe as the evening air cooled, walking slowly through the city streets. The lights reflected softly on the pavement, and she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. He matched his pace to hers, subtly attentive, and the simplicity of the gesture reinforced the sense of trust and care that had been growing steadily over their dates. At one point, they stopped at a quiet park she had mentioned enjoying in the past. The night was calm, and the soft rustle of leaves created a serene soundtrack for their conversation. They spoke about dreams for the future, not just personal ambitions, but the kind of lives they hoped to create, the values they wanted to live by, and the ways they wanted to connect meaningfully with others. She realized that with him, she could speak openly about things she rarely shared, without fear of judgment or misunderstanding. He asked her what had made her happiest that week, and she reflected before answering. She spoke about the small victories, the moments of connection, the laughter and conversation they had shared. He smiled and shared his own moments of happiness, and she realized that their joys often overlapped in subtle, meaningful ways. The sense of alignment between them was quiet, but undeniable. As they walked, they came across a small fountain. He suggested they sit for a moment, and she agreed. They sat side by side, watching the water shimmer in the soft lamplight. He asked her about her hopes and fears in life, and she spoke candidly, sharing thoughts she had kept private for years. He listened with patience and care, asking thoughtful questions that encouraged her to explore her feelings more deeply. She felt a sense of intimacy and trust that was rare and precious. She noticed how naturally he included her in every movement, every consideration, without drawing attention to the fact that she was in a wheelchair. It wasn't something he highlighted or made into an issue. It was simply part of how he navigated the world with her. This subtle attentiveness made her feel respected and valued as a person first, not defined by her limitations. The conversation eventually turned to love and relationships. She shared her hopes for a partner who could see her as a whole person, who would listen, support, and laugh with her through life's UPS and downs. He nodded thoughtfully, reflecting on his own experiences and perspectives, and she felt the authenticity of his words. There was no pressure, no forced declarations, just honest exchange, a mutual understanding growing in the quiet night. They laughed again, this time at a small incident involving a passerby's playful dog, and she felt a sense of joy that was pure and unforced. The evening was filled with these small, meaningful moments, gestures, conversations, laughter, that wove together into something profound. She realized that love and connection were often built in these quiet, everyday moments, rather than grand declarations or dramatic acts. As the night deepened, he asked her if she wanted to walk a little further. They wandered to the quiet streets, talking and sharing stories. She felt an increasing sense of ease, comfort, and trust. Each step, each exchange, each small act of care reinforced a bond that had been growing steadily since their first date. She realized that this connection wasn't fleeting or superficial. It was built on attentiveness, empathy, and mutual understanding. Eventually, they reached a small square where the city lights reflected softly on the pavement. They paused, looking around at the quiet beauty of the night. He turned to her and said, "I want you to know something. I admire the way you see the world, the way you handle challenges, and the way you bring joy and thoughtfulness into everything you do. Being with you feels natural and meaningful." Her chest warmed at his words. She smiled, feeling a surge of emotion she hadn't expected. "I feel the same way," she replied softly. "You make it easy to be myself, to share my thoughts, my laughter, and even my fears. I feel seen, and it's a rare thing. There was a pause, filled only by the gentle hum of the city around them. In that moment, she realized that their connection had transformed from a simple blind date into something deeply significant. It wasn't about appearances, gestures, or superficial attraction. It was about presence, understanding, and care. She felt a profound gratitude for the way he had treated her, not with pity, but with respect, attentiveness, and genuine affection. He reached out, taking her hand gently, and she felt a calm certainty settle over her. It wasn't dramatic declaration or an overwhelming surge of emotion. It was quiet, steady, and entirely real. She squeezed his hand in return, acknowledging the bond that had grown between them over these weeks. They stayed there for a while, talking, laughing softly, and simply enjoying each other's company. Every shared story, every gesture of care, every moment of genuine attentiveness had led them to this point. She realized that true connection was built over time, through consistency, respect, and authenticity. And now they had it. As the night drew to a close, he walked her back to her home. She felt a sense of peace, joy, and hope that she hadn't experienced in a long time. Before parting, he looked at her with sincerity and said, "I'm grateful for you, for who you are, and for this connection we're building. I hope we continue to grow together." She smiled, her heart full. "I'm grateful too, and I want that as well." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth and possibility. In that quiet exchange, a new chapter began. Not a chapter defined by fear, doubt, or limitations, but by mutual respect, care, and the shared potential for something lasting. As she entered her home and reflected on the night, she realized how far she had come. What had begun with apprehension, fear of judgment, and uncertainty had transformed into genuine trust, connection, and hope. The man she had met had not only seen her beyond her wheelchair, but had also appreciated her for her thoughts, humor, and spirit. It was a rare, beautiful experience, one she knew would stay with her forever. In the following days, their communication continued naturally and warmly. Every conversation reinforced the connection they had built. Every meeting deepened their trust, and every small act of thoughtfulness reminded her that genuine care and respect could exist, even in a world that often overlooked people like her. She felt a sense of renewal, hope, and quiet excitement for the future. Love, she realized, wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was often about the little things: attentiveness, patience, shared laughter, understanding, and authentic presence. And in him, she had found all of those things, proving to her that connection, respect, and genuine affection could thrive even in the most unexpected circumstances. The journey they had begun together was far from over, but now she knew with certainty that they had created something real, something built on trust, care, and the simple yet profound act of seeing each other fully. And for the first time in a long time, she looked toward the future with hope, gratitude, and the quiet joy of knowing that true connection was not only possible but present in her life.